We'll take the foreplay as read.
I'm glad no one saw that. People might talk.
What the fuck is he on about? Fuck are you on about?
Inconceivable!
It's a free country, don't you know that?
I didn't know it was that free.
Don't make people into heroes.
Fuck you. I can live my own life in my own way if I want to.
You're listening to A Shilling for Your Thoughts, the Random Topic podcast. I have two lovely guests with me today. I have
Liz from Ambrose Cosplay.
And
Prue from Productions Cosplay.
Woohoo! And why are you guys here today? What are we talking about?
Well, we recently both went and competed at San Diego International for the Cosplay Masquerade competition.
Woohoo! And I was there too, which is what I'm going to blame my gap in podcasts. I'm going to blame it on cosplay, even though I literally did none of it.
Hey, you rehearsed. It's true. I made you rehearse. It was my fault. I took her from her podcasting duties.
Oh, yes. We'll blame it on that. And my sad computer. But what did you guys cosplay? I mean, I know, but let's tell the listeners.
Well, I was a part of a group from Wreck-It Ralph, the Disney movie that came out about 6 years ago, and I cosplayed as Wreck-It Ralph. And then we had two other people in our group who both played Vanellope von Schweetz in different costume versions, and then on stage we had a magical transformation where one turned into the other because stage magic is fun.
Stage magic. What about you?
And I managed to rope Heidi into being the David Bowie to my Sarah Williams. And we were Jareth and Sarah from the movie
hottest Jareth
Labyrinth.
and Sarah.
Well, the hottest Jareth for sure. 100%. But yeah, so we were Sarah and Jareth from the movie Labyrinth. In the ballroom scene specifically, so their ballroom attire.
The sparkliest of the costumes.
So many sparkles.
So many sparkles happened. So, how long ago did you guys start preparing for this? Because I think when I first interviewed you about cosplay, we kind of dropped the hint that something big was coming, but we didn't want to give away too much. Was that about the time, or was it even before that?
What do you mean by prepare? Like, came up with the idea, started research,
or
started buying stuff?
Any of it. What's your process like? So tell us when you started Prue and what that was like.
So for me, I had known I wanted to enter San Diego Comic-Con for this year since about, I would say, last summer. And I originally started working on a Maleficent costume. From Sleeping Beauty, and I had gotten about halfway done, and I wasn't super happy with how it was going. It was going very slowly for me. So when the entry form opened to enter for becoming a finalist at San Diego, I was like kind of worried if I would get it done. So I asked a friend of mine who was making a fabulous dress if she would be interested in also entering her dress in another competition, and I would be a side character to that. So I was definitely like riding on her coattails, but I made it clear, like, I'll make my costume, I'll make sure our act is awesome, I'll do all of the paperwork and everything, like running the show, so it'd be less stressful on her since I was, riding her coattails. And so since she made the Vanellope dress and everything, I entered that in for our category, and I decided to make a Wreck-It Ralph then. Technically, I decided to be casual Vanellope with her first, and I made the costume and everything, and then I was like, I'm not feeling this. I don't think it's good enough to win with just the two of us on stage. Actually, I think it was after WonderCon that I decided, I'm like, this isn't good enough to win.
And when did WonderCon take place?
That was in March of this year.
So that was pretty close.
Yeah, very last minute. I decided at the end of March, I'm like, this isn't good enough. So what I did was my Vanellope costume, I found a third person who was willing to join in our group, and I altered everything down to fit her, and then I made myself Ralph instead, so we had more people to interact with on stage, and I definitely think that's what upped it from, oh, that was good to watch, to that was winning. That was
fun, yeah. So your costume, you only had like a month or two to really finish it.
I think for the two that I made, the casual Vanellope and the Wreck-It Ralph, I made them both in under a month with very little sleep.
Yes. That's pretty crazy. What about you, Liz? When did you start crafting?
Well, it all started when I was a child. I think, I kind of distinctly remember when I was I must have been 8 years old. My sister and I watched Labyrinth for the first time because my sister is a child of, not the 80s, I guess. She was born in 79, but I digress. Labyrinth is one of her favorite movies, and so she wanted to introduce me to that. And I kind of, I remember watching it. It's very weird.
It's a very weird.
It's a very
I love
weird
it
film.
so much, but it's
Agreed.
so weird.
It is weird. And I kind of was like, okay, what part of this movie made you think of me? I'm not sure. But then we get to the ballroom scene, and I was like, okay, this is what she was talking about. And I remember, when I first saw that dress, long before I'd ever touched a sewing machine or looked at a sewing machine or thought about cosplay at all, because I was a kid, I was like, I want that dress. Want that dress. So this has been a costume that's been on my mind for forever, and it just kind of fit with Prue and I both were like, yep, we're going to San Diego, so what are we going to do? And I was like, okay, this is the dress that I'm going to make. We were thinking, okay, well, you can't just be Sarah on stage. That's so boring. You have to have David Bowie there.
You have to have both, yeah.
Right. So we had discussed for a long time, gentlemen that we know who would be a good David Bowie.
None of them qualified.
Yeah, could not come up with a single Bowie-ish gentleman until we were like, okay, well, how about the ladies? What ladies do we know who could pull this off? And there was only one we could think of. And it pulled it off, you did.
And it was last
Just
October
barely.
that we came across you.
Well, what's even funnier is I remember around October, you, Prue, mentioning to me, yeah, Liz is having trouble. And you were kind of like, she's having trouble. And I was like, oh, that sucks. I hope she finds somebody. And I, did not get at all that you were like, And then it was, a few nights later, you're like, so I think, and she just sent me, all of this stuff. And you were like, look, you have to do this. And then you messaged me, that same night. And I was like, all right.
We even sent you a side-by-side of your face and David Bowie.
Yes.
Okay, if she's not insulted, everything will be great.
She's not insulted.
But of
Girl
course,
who doesn't want to be David
right?
Bowie.
Obviously. But anyways, so I've been researching Sarah at the very least for quite some time, several years.
It's a very intricate costume.
Oh yeah. So I've been researching it for a long time. Bought the materials. Over a year ago now, so it would have been, I think, last April.
Yeah.
So the April before last, rather. And then, kind of started that costume in May of 2017 and slowly kind of worked on it all year. Of course, kind of picked up speed as we got closer to San Diego. Jareth was actually much easier to complete than Sarah was. Sarah had tons of redoing, seam ripping. This is the wrong fabric. I'm out of this. A lot of her fabrics they're just not in print anymore. They're not made. So I had to find other things to substitute. So Sarah was super frustrating.
The 80s are evil.
Oh, yeah. Which made Jareth even worse because it came together so easily and then it fits you like a glove. And I'm like, okay, well, this is great. Heidi's gonna look wonderful.
Yes, I remember you stressing a little bit well, can't have one half looking good. What was the most challenging part of the Sarah costume for you?
Oh, gosh. Right off the bat, I would have to say, I kind of had the dress just in my head. Although I had been researching it, it was mostly I was looking at detail stuff, okay, what kinds of fabrics am I going to need?
Up.
So I felt like I was ready to start because I already had a giant hoop skirt, and then upon a second glance, I saw it's not a hoop skirt, it's grand panniers. And so those a pattern had to be ordered, and I had to make those myself. I mean, you can buy them; they're just expensive. And
yes.
I was like, no, just I'll make it myself. How hard can it be? So right off the bat, the first 20 hours of that costume.
20 hours. I'm just gonna stop you there. The first 20 hours of that costume.
Just for structure.
The first 20 hours of that costume, none of the actual recognizable pieces have been made, and already I was like, okay, what have I done? I've done a bad thing, which is,
yes.
After the Grand Panniers, I think I really stepped back. It was like, okay, you better really research what's coming, because as far as working on a timeline, I was like, I cannot afford another one of these. No. Oh, just kidding. I made the complete wrong thing. So that, Sarah, I feel was a challenge from start to finish. I don't think there was a single easy thing in that entire costume that I was like, oh, I'm so relieved. I got to this part. Every part was like, oh gosh.
I think it's kind of deceptive in that way, because just from the movie, you're like, oh, it kind of looks like a big wedding gown. But then
Which is what a lot of people make it out of.
Yeah,
and
so you think,
correct.
oh, this will be fine. I've made gowns before. You've made big gowns, so I'm sure it was just like, okay. And then once you got into the details, it was like, oh, it's not quite what I thought.
Oh, yeah.
That's not quite what I thought.
Oh, yeah. No, I feel like every step was, like, another, like, fun little surprise, even though I researched it and was like, okay, I think I know what's coming. As soon as I got into it, it was like, oh, shoot, you know, I have already started going about this the wrong way. I need to start over.
Ugh. That sounds awful. So just the whole thing was the most difficult.
Oh, yeah. No, there wasn't, I don't think, you know, I guess if I had to pick one thing, you know, other than structure, getting the sleeves to maintain their shape was something I think I figured out literally like 2 days before we left to San Diego. I finally found a method that I was like, okay, they'll stay puffy, great.
They'll stay.
And then the wig itself, I really hate wig styling.
Yeah.
And yet,
you're very
all
good
of
at
her
it.
wigs are amazing.
I hate wig styling, and that's not true. But no, it's not. The wig itself was a massive pain. The promotional images of Sarah versus the movie screen caps
Yeah, they're
are
completely different
hairstyles. You know, they're both big, so I guess they're similar that way, but they're big in very different ways. So the structure of the hair itself, and then, you know, styling it, and then you have the headdress as well that goes in the hair, so it's like if the headdress had a problem and I had to take it out, all those curls now get, you know, kind of messed up, and I had to redo that. So wig styling is a huge frustration for me still, and that wig was a monster. Yeah. So
it was a very, very big wig. It was like huge. Bigger than your head.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
So what about you, Prue? What was the most complicated piece to your costumes?
Well, considering my costume was overalls.
Yes.
Technically, these were the first pair of pants I made. So.
Oh, well, there you go.
The hardest part was after I made them, he has very specific embroidery.
Mm-hmm.
And I made, instead of out of denim like most people do, I made them out of a very waffly type fabric to look pixelated because he's supposed to be an old video game. So for the embroidery, I wanted very big, noticeable things to go with along the pixelated design choice I had made. So I ended up having to use an embroidery needle to hand do all of the stitches, which go up and down the legs, double around the waist, over the straps, around the pockets. And I use this, like, I didn't use embroidery thread. It's like this really thick cording most people use for tying corsets. So to embroider with something that thick through basically what used to be a shower curtain was very time consuming for my costume. When I tried to make
straight and get it looking
cohesive. When I tried to make the two costumes in under a month because I'm insane like that, getting 20 hours worth of embroidery in it was difficult for me.
Yeah.
But along with wig working like Liz, this was the first time I did like anime spikes in a wig.
Yeah.
Which I'm very surprised how well they turned out for it being my first time. Probably down to anime spike things in the future, but the best part was I used prosthetic hair to make the sideburns and the eyebrows.
Yes.
Because I wanted to make sure I looked like a man on stage. And so I made them, like, cut them out of lace front fabrics and everything and spiked sideburns, which was probably my favorite part of the costume. And then about a week before the competition, I was like, why don't I think this costume is done? It should be done. It's a week away. And then I decided, you need to wear shoes on stage. They don't allow bare feet. And Ralph has bare feet. So I got some puppet foam I had lying around and some felt, and I made feet that were about a foot longer than my feet.
They were like giant feet slippers.
Giant feet
they were
slippers,
amazing.
But they were very comfortable. But definitely, I think that's why I won most humorous on stage.
But it's because of your feet and the way you had to walk with the feet. You kind of had to like like hobble a little bit.
I was definitely very animated, and I had funny. Like the hair and everything. I think I pulled off being a man pretty well.
I'd say so.
I agree. How is it that we had two cross-dressers on this trip?
The boys aren't as fun as us, obviously.
Obviously, we're more fun than boys.
It's true.
Well, the funny thing about that is my dad has met Prue numerous times. I've actually known Prue since we were in high school. So I was showing my mom the two videos of both of the acts. And when Prue came on, I'm like, yeah, there's Prue. My mom's like, oh, okay. My dad's like, where? Where's Prue? I'm like, right there. Oh, in the dress? no, right there. That's a man. Where's Prue? Prue's there. Where's Prue? And my mom and I were like, Prue is Wreck-It Ralph. And we were like pointing, and he was just not getting it. Part of it was he was tired. He's like, let's go home. Let's go home. And my mom was like, I want to see this. And he was so confused, and we were just dying. I was like, I have to tell Prue. Apparently you pulled it off so well. My dad was like, no, that's a man. Where is Prue?
I'm a man.
I can't tell you how many people I like have showed that video to Heidi that were like, that's a woman for Jared. Like I think my mom, after I sent her the video, she texted me and she was like, whatever you did to turn Heidi into a man, it worked. Like, well done.
That's just what's deep in my soul. Yeah, I was showing that to somebody else, and they were like, oh, but where were you? And I was like, no, that is me. And they were like, wait, no, but that's you? I'm like, yes, that is me.
I am David Bowie.
And what's even funnier about that is that makeup was barely a step different than what I do for my normal work makeup. Like,
that was another benefit of having you come to San Diego with us, was we could be like, Heidi, how did we fix our makeup?
Yes, I'm like, fix that. Don't do that. Don't put that there.
She is much better at makeup than we are.
It's true.
I just pretend to be.
We come to you far more often than people realize.
Truth. So this was a bit of a drive from Arizona to San Diego. Is this the first time you guys have traveled for any cosplay, any conventions, or do you guys travel?
This is not the first time we've traveled. This is the biggest time.
The biggest time?
For sure.
So normally
As in the biggest vehicle of all time.
True.
The first time we traveled out of state together for a con was for Denver Comic-Con, and we flew, which we luckily thought about it. We're like, okay, we have to make sure we bring costumes that can fit in luggage,
that must
so that
be a
can go on a
challenge.
plane.
Oh, yeah.
So that one was much easier because we thought ahead for transportation. The two cons that we've gone to in California, we're like, we're driving, so we don't have to think about how we're going to move things there. Big mistake.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and what's funny about Denver, too, is remember on our way to the airport home, how, like, I was super late for my flight, and, like, barely made it, and, like, I remember I, like, checked my bag, and a little message came up that's like, you're super late, like, your bag's not making it on the flight.
Oh, are you serious?
So all of my Elsa stuff was in that bag, and so I was like, okay, well, whatever, at least I have the receipt. I also had a piece of trash in my hand, and, like, brain was like, trash goes in the trash can, so I threw them both away.
Oh, my God.
And, like, as I, like, sat down on the plane that I barely made it on, and I was like, oh no, like, I am never seeing that Elsa costume again, am I? Only, like, no. I swear by the hand of God, or, like, whatever you believe in, did that luggage make it on that plane?
So because it did.
It did. But yeah, just funny story about packing costumes. Like, don't throw that little luggage receipt away.
Also, don't arrive late to the airport where you're like, hold the door!
Oh no. That sounds very eventful. I would say we had some eventful experiences this time.
Yes.
It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but let's talk about some challenges. What were some challenges, Prue?
You mean like someone having a giant hoop skirt? And then not only having someone in my group having a giant hoop skirt, but someone in my friend's group having a giant Kanye and giant sleeves.
Beast of costumes.
So the truck that we took out to San Diego is like comically large.
It's very funny. It looks like a cartoon.
It just barely fit all of our costume stuff, like just barely.
Oh my gosh.
Because between both of our groups, those 5 costumes,
wigs, repair kits,
yes,
all of that, makeup kits.
We brought a sewing machine. Never used it, but you never know.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, we had a giant pickup truck filled to the brim with only 3 of us in it. You still drove separately.
I still drove separate,
normal stuff,
and had some of the other pieces, some wigs and things.
Barely got everything there.
Well, and Prue was good enough to think ahead and got us a loading dock time for the actual masquerade, and that's very nice that they offer that for people with really big costumes, that you can reserve time at the loading dock to actually, unload it without having to somehow get huge costume pieces through that giant crowd.
Yeah.
And through security. However, what we found out after the masquerade is apparently the loading dock isn't open after the fact.
Which is so dumb.
Well, and the bad thing about that was it was not really adequately explained, so we were just like, oh, we assume, because if it was closed, they would have told us, right? No.
What would we do? Just leave our costumes at Comic-Con? Like, we had to have the loading dock to get in. Why would they not think? we have to get out.
So it might have been open for a short time afterwards, but we missed that.
Yeah, if
because
it was.
we had the award ceremony.
Right, if it was open, we definitely missed that.
Definitely. So that was a challenge. Luckily, we had somebody rescue us, and we were saved. Because the other problem we had was when you have a hoop skirt as big as we did, and panniers as big as we did, Ubers don't like you. Ubers, Lyfts, whatever, they do not like you. They do not want to take that. And a lot of them don't have vehicles big enough, especially for the hoop skirt that we did have. It was bigger than most vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's why we
Which
had to
sounds
take
ridiculous, but it is not a joke.
Yeah.
The diameter of that was bigger than most vehicles. We ran into the lovely Jacqueline, and she had a vehicle that had, like, a rack on it for...
bikes or
No,
something?
kayaks.
Kayaks.
Oh, like kayaks or canoes. I'm going to say kayaks. And we were able to actually, like, stick that hoop skirt on the top of the vehicle.
Yeah, we had our hands outside the windows holding it down to get the 2 miles to our Airbnb.
Oh, it doesn't help, too, that, like, because of Comic-Con, like, all the streets around,
Everything
the
is
convention
closed.
center is closed, so you can't even get close to the convention center for someone to even pick you up. So, yeah, that was super fun. Transportation.
We
So much
definitely
fun.
learned if we go to San Diego next year, we are going to make costumes smaller.
So that would be what you would suggest to anybody going to a big con like that, is the bigger the con, the smaller the costume.
Think about
Yes and
transportation,
no.
for sure. Like,
Right,
think about how
yeah.
you're gonna do it. A lot of people there
Or make it
were,
break it downable.
Right. A lot of
Yes.
people in, the green room area were putting together hoop skirts once they got on site.
Mhm.
Like, meaning they had, the sleeves separate from the rods. And we were kind of like, oh, yeah, all right. We did not think of that in
Yeah.
time, so.
And people with big armor pieces and everything. Yes, big usually does win at stuff like this. Because the bigger on stage, the more impressive it looks if it's made well. And I'm like, how did you get that there? And then I was watching backstage, and they, like, broke it down to little tiny pieces. And I'm like, you had foresight, I shall learn.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they didn't necessarily create it to be one piece. As they created it, they kept in mind, how can this be multiple pieces? But sometimes you don't think about that because you're just trying to create the end vision. And then when it comes to, wait, how do we get this there? It's like, well, all right, gotta figure out a way.
And it was our first time at San Diego, so now we know for next time.
Oh, yeah.
But honestly, I think it was fairly seamless for as chaotic as cons usually are and as, like, our costumes were. I think that could have definitely gone worse.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Luckily, the staff was very good there. They were all very helpful, willing to, like, what do you need me to grab? Do you want me to carry this for you? Do you want me to help? Which we didn't expect. And we were like, really? You're going to help us move this stuff?
Yeah,
Awesome.
That was very shocking.
Oh, their staff is wonderful. They do
Yeah.
a great job.
It's the same staff as WonderCon, and we went to WonderCon for the first time again this year, and we decided we're going back just because their staff is absolutely worth it. Their staff makes it so much less stressful that it makes us deal with going across state lines to continue to compete with them.
Well, and it even seemed like, too, they all were having fun and they all wanted to be there. They weren't just like, yeah, I'm just here to be here. Like, they all seemed to enjoy and want to be a part of it, which is really good when you don't feel like, oh, I'm inconveniencing you. You're like, oh, no, you actually want to participate. That's awesome.
Yeah, they were wonderful.
What was crazy was because it's a lot of the same staff, they had met us a
Yes,
few months
some of them
previous.
recognized you, too.
Some of them recognized, and some of us didn't recognize
Yes.
until we explained it. We're like, oh yeah, I remember meeting you a few months ago. You did? Yeah, we were the Sanderson sisters. No, you weren't. And I'm like,
Because you were just like,
yes,
yes completely
yes,
different.
We were.
I kind of wonder if those den mothers, like, if they're people they take care of win, if they have, like, bragging rights or something.
They
Like,
have,
Oh, you know
there
they
has
have to
be
have
like
bragging rights.
some sort of thing
like
going
5 of
on.
my groups won, guys. Like, I'm a pretty big deal.
So when we were in there's like a back green room where you can prepare, and they give you what is like a den mother or den father. It's a person that is kind of like there to manage and help you if you're like, crises, we need a hot glue gun. They can go find a hot glue gun or find somebody that has thread or bring you water, snacks, whatever, basically. They were kind of there for, whatever, but
It's someone
they were
that
all
you can
wonderful.
focus your questions at, as opposed to everyone going to the director who has enough going on because he's running the rest of the show. And it's such a smart idea. I wish more people could get volunteers like that.
Right.
Yeah, and the ones that we had was absolutely wonderful, right, Liz?
Yes. Oh, she was
my
so
gosh.
sweet. I legit, I have no trouble admitting it. I was having a freak out, and she I don't know how many times she kind of took me aside and was like you can do this. We don't even know each other. We just met, and she was like, no, you're gonna go.
She was really invested. She was
Yeah.
like, I've seen your costume. I've seen how much work you put into this, and I really want this to go well for you.
Right. She was wonderful. Just what a sweet person.
Very sincere.
Now, speaking of her freaking out and stressing out,
Uh-oh. What are you about to do?
she is not the only one who's stressing out. I just
That's
internalize
true.
it better.
Sort of.
I definitely know that both of us, when we were talking after we had performed and before the end of the show, we go back to the green room and, you have to wait and figure out who wins and everything. There's a halftime show while the judges deliberate. Both of us were like, man, I don't know if I want to come back next year. This is way stressful, getting everything here. I mean, we had fun, but at what cost? And then the moment that both of our, names were called for the winner's line, we're like,
we're coming back.
I guess we're coming back next year.
Part of the prize is you get a 4-day pass to next year, so
we will return.
we will return.
What was kind of fun for me was I didn't have to do any work. All I had to do...
You did do a lot of work.
All I
You
had
rehearsed.
to do was rehearse and make sure I knew how to throw the makeup on. Like I said, basically the exact makeup I wear to work with different eyebrows. Let's be honest. The only difference was my eyebrows and nude lips. So I got to kind of participate without a lot of the stresses. There was some moments where we were all kind of stressing, how are we going to get there? How are we going to find an Uber? How are we going to direct this Uber who doesn't know what the hell we're talking about to get to this back area that's a restricted area, but it's no, we have access. Just please trust us. There was moments like that where it was trying to carry everything in. But for the most part, I got to kind of sit on the sidelines.
Oh, yeah, that's because I'm the fairy godmother.
Yeah,
I take that stress on my shoulders.
I don't have to do the things. So for me, kind of watching, it was really crazy because I could definitely see how it could be extremely stressful with all of the work and time and just heart and soul you guys have poured into the costumes and the performance and everything. And it's a lot is at stake. And so, of course, it's very fun, but also the amount of stress I can imagine is just crazy because I was just I don't really have any stress, but oh man, that must suck.
I think, for a con this big, the competition every year is always fierce. And
Yes.
it was the same this year. Everyone
was amazing.
And I know for me especially, these two costumes were a dream of mine for a long, long time to pull off, and just to do. But as far as craftsmanship goes, because there are kind of two different aspects of the competition. There is craftsmanship, and then there's your showmanship. And some awards are a combination of both. Some are mostly craftsmanship.
Yes.
Some are mostly showmanship. But as far as craftsmanship goes, those two are pretty much the best of my ability level at this time. And that's hard to put that out to be judged because everyone looks great.
Because what if your best isn't good enough?
Right. There is that feeling that you're oh my gosh, this is the best I can do right now. And it's kind of hard to look around and be oh my gosh, I don't know if it's good enough to be here. I'm not sure.
Well, that's the thing is you're seeing everybody in their costumes, but we're not necessarily deconstructing and seeing what's their seams look like once underneath. So when you're just surrounded by a bunch of people in fabulous costumes, it's oh my gosh, wow,
Why am
look
I
at the
here?
competition. Yeah, I remember you both were just why are we here? And I'm shut up, we're beautiful, we're wonderful, we are the best.
See, and for Liz here, I know she felt that way because it was, we've discussed, it's definitely at the top of her craftsmanship. We're trying to figure out what more she can do. That is a very difficult
let's
costume.
brag a
she
little
made.
bit. The judges were kind of starstruck by the ability of the costume, the craftsmanship, the attention to detail.
I don't know if I would say that, but
Absolutely true.
I would. Like I said,
I
as
was
an
eavesdropping.
outsider, I was
Absolutely
just kind of
true.
I'm not as invested in it because I'm just wearing it. I'm just the model. I just stand here. But I could tell, you were kind of stressed. So I was like, hey, look at her Grand Panniers. And you were like, oh, yes. And I was like, pull up her skirt, look. And they were like, may we?
Well, and both Prue and Heidi were great to have there. Prue wrote up talking points for me to talk about because
Yes.
I have to say I'm way better with written word than spoken. Like, especially for prejudging, which is why, you make the little book for them that they can read, at their leisure. But as far as speaking to them, every time it's a spoken prejudging, I just, like, word vomit, and then after the fact, I'm like, I forgot to mention the most important part. So Prue wrote up talking points for me so I wouldn't forget some of the major things, and then, of course, Heidi was a great partner to have in that she also was like, talk about the jewelry, and I was like, oh yeah, like, and the jewelry.
I was like, look at these things, and I was like, touch this, feel this.
Well, and I will say, Sarah and Jareth are two costumes that I made that I had absolutely no problem with them looking at the inside at all, because I do feel like I had a good structure going on the inside, and I'm proud of the craftsmanship on the inside. It's not just a mess. And they actually did have you take your jacket off at one point, and at first I was like, no, don't do it. And then I was like, no, it's fine. It's okay, it's fine.
I was like, you got this. And, well, it's scary because you're being judged, and they are right there judging you, touching you, looking up close, and, like, staring at you like, tell us about it. And it's hard to be like, well, I'm fabulous and here's why. Because you're just like, oh my gosh. So I was like, well, I can say that because it's not my work. So it doesn't seem like, I'm really great. Let me tell you how great I am. I'm just like, I can do that for you because I'm not the one that did it. So I can be like, oh, look how great she is. Look how wonderful this was. And you were just like, oh, well, I mean.
But if you insist.
But they did agree. So, I mean, one of the big things they commented on was the sleeves. One of the judges mentioned you were the only one she's ever seen accurately do those sleeves. And when they found out that you did the pattern for the sleeves, they were kind of like, what?
Those are the most uncomfortable sleeves I've ever made. I will say that.
You're like I hate them.
Pretty much. Like, I will say, like, Sarah is one of the most uncomfortable costumes I have ever made. But I'm proud that those sleeves did not collapse.
Beauty is pain, dear.
It's true. I mean, we had to, like,
true.
beat your arms into those sleeves.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then, like, you were like, well, now I can't move. I am T-Rex.
Yep. Yeah, I was like, okay, everybody else is going to have to do everything from now on because I can't lift my arms up.
Yes. Neither of us could. We were like, this is as high as they go. And this is about, like, mid-level.
Pretty much.
Like, raise your hand. No, we can't.
Which is why in the movie they just sway there and they don't they don't do any fancy moves. And we're like, oh, well, that's why.
You're like, that's why the choreography is like that.
Now we know.
Did you have any moments, Prue, that you were just like, oh, shit? Or did you have any, like, crises moments or anything where you were like, what have I done?
You mean the entire time?
The entire time?
No. See, the issue for me was listening to her freak out about why am I here and everything, which is something me and her, like, it's kind of a tradition at this point, that we second guess ourselves backstage surrounded by all the amazing people. Every time she kept saying that, I'm like, okay, look at you. And then look at me. I am in overalls made out of a shower curtain. Why am I here?
Yeah, and that's hard because it's not that there was anything wrong with your costume. It was perfect, but it's a cartoon character.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. It's kind of a
much more
category.
difficult to compare side by side from
100%.
an animated character to bringing it to real life versus where your guys' were real life and you made it perfectly exact match.
It is not perfectly
It's
exact.
perfectly exact match. Stop listening to her. And that is totally different. So it made me feel like, why am I here? This is not the same level of quality. But like I was trying to say earlier, she was all worried about her craftsmanship and everything because that's what those costumes needed.
Yes.
I was more worried about the performance because while I did have simpler costumes for 2 out of our 3, like our Princess Vanellope dress was what brought us to the correct level because it was incredible. But the other 2, I'm like, I want to focus on the performance because I know we don't have the same level on some of our costumes. We put all the work in, everything that could be done. I made feet, I made the hair. I put as much work as possible to make these characters match. So I focused more on the performance, and luckily, with all the rehearsals we did for our group, it did pay off for a performance award, whereas your guys' is paid off for a craftsmanship award.
Well, and part of cosplay is not only can you make the costume, can you wear it, is can you kind of embody that character. I think that's part of it, is people want to walk up to you and be like, oh, you are the princess. Oh, you are Wreck-It Ralph. Oh, you are Sarah. You know, they want to see things like that. And especially with a cartoon character, sometimes those can be big or goofy or, over the top, and you have to be able to pull that off, even though
Otherwise,
you're
you
nervous
look really
and stressed. Yeah, or you're just like, I'm a person in a costume. Like, you don't want to do that. You want to be a cosplayer.
There's a difference where if I went on stage and I did like our dance routine as myself, I would have just been like spinning and twirling and stuff. But I went out there as Ralph. I had these giant feet and stepping.
And your hands too. You had the gloves.
Yeah, I made gloves with square fingers because I didn't want to take off my fingernails. And the gloves made it so hot, you guys. I don't know how Disneyland
it would have looked
does it.
very strange if you didn't have the gloves. I think
Right,
with the big
they had
feet,
to match the feet. And so, like, going on stage, I had to make sure all of my movements were bigger. And luckily, I've had clowning training when I went to ASU and everything. And applying that to a big animated character like this on stage is, like, having that training and practice and stuff is what makes it a complete difference. So when you think, oh, that's a simple costume, why did that win? It's because you have to also think about it won because it wasn't just a simple costume.
It wasn't just the costume.
It was a very complicated act that I did on stage with the simple costume.
Yes, you probably made it a bit more complicated than you had to even, but that's what you do.
Yes.
Which sometimes I think kind of helps because you're like, is this over the top and a bit much, maybe unnecessary? Yes.
Nope,
but
needs
did
more.
I pull it off? Yes.
Every time I do one of these big cons, like littler cons, I can kind of relax. But big cons like this, I do the entire act in my head and I do everything. And then about a few weeks beforehand, I'm like, okay, this is decent. This is acceptable. What can I add to make it more? So that's why making it more is what's important for both of our... Because I do
Definitely.
all of the directing for Liz's performances.
That's right,
and
yes.
every time I ask her a few weeks beforehand, I'm like, okay, I'm good where we're at. This is acceptable. What can we do to add it to make it better?
What more do you want?
And I think it's an important step for our process when we do things is making it, like, you can't do enough.
No. So at your process, do you start choreographing before the costumes are done? Do you wait till they're done?
Most of the time when I know I'm going to make a costume for a performance, like a cosplay masquerade, I definitely try to think of an act. Not the full, complete choreography and everything, but at least a song or a skit or something before I make the costume. Because there are many costumes out there where I'm like, that would be cool. I can think of 0 things to do with that on stage and that would be boring. So I'm not going to compete in that.
Right.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of discussions like that where we're like, okay, what would you like to compete as? Oh, that would be really good. You know, the craftsmanship's up there. What are you going to do on stage, though? And if we can't think of anything interesting, it kind of gets axed and we move on to the next idea.
So that becomes maybe one to use not for a competition,
Yeah,
not
that's
for
fun.
competing. That's something that maybe...
Right.
Or you put on the back burner until you think of something.
I think part of the planning process is that, so obviously you're making this costume because you love some aspect about the source material, and you kind of have to make that accessible to everyone who is watching you on stage and make them also enjoy it. You can't just assume everyone at that show also loves the things that you love.
Yes.
Because it doesn't always translate. You do have to come up with something that's a little more crowd-pleasing if you're going to have that kind of showmanship.
Well, I do think that was something I was kind of surprised about, was there were a lot of people that stopped and they were like, oh my god, Labyrinth! But there were a lot of people that were like, whoa, you guys look great. What are you? We had somebody that thought it was like a Beauty and the Beast thing, which I was very confused. Because I had the mask that, like, I guess they thought it was like a beast mask. I don't know. But I think the fact that the costumes were pretty and they were pleasing to look at and the choreography Prue did was fun, made it so that even if somebody was like, I have no idea what that's from, they could still enjoy it. And it wasn't so, because sometimes you see costumes you're like, that's really cool, but like I don't get it. You don't know what it's from. You don't know what it's supposed to look like, really. So it's
Especially
kind of...
when it's like anime or video games.
They can be a bit...
So they may go out on stage and do exactly what happens in the video game, but if I don't know the video game and it's not particularly entertaining or funny or scary or something, then I'm not really going to enjoy your performance.
It's like an inside joke. Like, I'm sure if I understood the joke, this would be super funny or, this would be super cool, but because I don't know those nuances, it's sort of lost on me.
Yeah.
Luckily, the crowd really did seem to get into Labyrinth. That was something I was
Yes.
a little worried about, that it wouldn't be quite as accessible as I was hoping. But the announcers did a really good job of introducing our act, and the audience was like saying the words along with them.
Yes.
This crowd reminds you of the Babe. What Babe? And they were all, the Babe
And then I
with
heard
the
a bunch of,
power.
the whole crowd was like, the Babe with the power. It's like, oh, good, they know.
Right, and then as soon as the music started, of course, Heidi went out there and just, like, riled everyone up, and everyone, like, lost their minds. It was great.
Well, and there's some videos that were taken towards the back, and you can hear when Liz walks on, gasps are like, oh my gosh, it's so pretty. And it's just because we intentionally did it to where they weren't sure that there was going to be two people.
Right.
You specifically wanted it to be like, I want them to only think that we have the Goblin King coming out, we have Jareth coming out. I don't want them to know about Sarah until it's like a big surprise.
And having surprises on stage is very, very important.
Yes. Same with Prue, you had a transformation.
Yes.
You want to talk about kind of like what happened?
So I stand by always try and surprise the audience throughout your act. You're on there for 1 minute to 2 minutes. You have a very short amount of time. You want to make sure that they are completely engaged the entire time you're on stage.
Well, it's a short amount of time, but it feels like
very long.
It feels long, especially if your act is boring. It's like the longest minute of your life.
Yes.
You're like up there like reconsidering all of your life decisions.
And so for our Princess Vanellope dress, it's about 15 feet around. Like, it's
That's
a
not a
giant
joke.
dress. She has difficulty moving in it very far. She can walk. That's about it. So for her, we had her walk straight to her pointing spot on stage. Luckily, since the hoop skirt is so big, we got to fit Taylor, our second Vanellope, under the hoop skirt, who's crawling across the stage.
So she just had to crawl the entirety of the stage.
Underneath this hoop skirt until our Vanellope stopped where she was supposed to be. And then in our act, we had a point where she changes costume, just like in the movie. And so we had her fall forward onto the ground and flipped her cape over her head so she disappeared, while Taylor rolled out from under the hoop skirt and stood up and like, poof, magic, I'm in a different outfit, even though it's two different girls. They're in the same wig, different outfits, and if people, might have been drunk or something, they could have thought, how did they do that?
Well, I saw multiple videos. There was one from the side, and I was like, damn, because you can kind of see, spoils the illusion, but there was a couple shots straight on, and I heard people saying that a lot of people that had that straight on view thought there was only two people in your group. They thought she rolled out the back of the costume. I'm like, okay. I mean, I guess I could see that.
But that was the goal.
That was, and to the effect that when you went up to get your awards, they were like, oh, here's your two. And you're like, no, there were two Vanellopes.
Yeah.
And even the judges were kind of like, oh, that's right, there were two.
There were three of us who need an award.
Vanellopes. Speaking of awards, all right, Prue, what did you get?
So we got we got most humorist.
Most humorous, best funny.
Best funny. We got the best funny award. And what's funny is when they call you over to the winners from the green room, they don't tell you what you win. Yes,
you have no idea. You're
so they just
going
say,
backstage.
These people won something. Go backstage. And so we're backstage and we're like, oh God, what did we win? Did we get honorable mention? Did you expect, so when you were sitting there though, before they called your name, we're all sitting in the green room. We've all been watching whoever else has been competing. We've been watching them on a screen. And then they're like, all right, when we call your name, line up. And it gets very quiet and very tense. What were you feeling, Prue? Were you like, this isn't going to happen? Or you were like, I definitely won something? I was definitely feeling, can you hurry up? I want pizza.
At that point, none of us had eaten for hours. Because we were like, we'll be able to eat, right?
No.
Right?
Nope.
So I definitely did not think we won anything because our act was... It was okay. Everyone thought it was really good. We didn't think it was that great.
That's because that didn't go according to your exact plan. But nobody else would ever know that.
Also, by the time you did it, you were very tired and grumpy.
Yes, I was very tired, grumpy. I was hot. Even though everyone else was freezing backstage, I was melting. Because
we were very warm as well.
I was dying.
We were in long sleeves and we were just like, we can't move very much. Don't ask us to move. We can't move.
The wig weighed about as much as a small child.
Yes.
So while everyone is silent backstage waiting for numbers to be called, I did not think we'd be called. And then we our number was called, and I'm like, oh great, we have to put our things back on.
You had someone that was half dressed.
Yeah, we had taken like pieces off, trying to cool down.
Well,
and
did you take them off because you thought you weren't going to
No,
win
I did
anything?
not think we were going to win
Oh,
anything.
so it was like, oh no.
And I'm like, oh god, get backstage. I'm like, I have to have things on.
Yes.
So I have to help her put her like top back on. I already sent our second Vanellope away because she had other things to do. And I'm like, technically you don't need to be here. If we win, shock, whatever, we can go out with just the two of us and people can just think, oh, there was only one Vanellope.
Yeah.
And she was like you were. She didn't really put work into the costume. She was
She was
there
just
as
the
a model,
model.
and she was fabulous. She did a great job. She was full energy and everything. So we'd already sent her away. That's how much I didn't think we won. We were getting dressed and stuff, so I didn't even hear your guys' number be called until we were backstage, and then I saw you guys, and I'm like, oh, good. This makes sense again.
This makes sense again. Well, what's funny is when we were sitting there, it was like people were getting called, and they were getting to where they weren't going to call anymore, and you and I were kind of looking at each other, and you were like, well, I did my best. And I was like, no. And I put on my gloves that you had for me, and I
Got your
grabbed the
balls
mask.
ready.
Yep, I got my balls ready. You'll have to see the video to get it. Actually, we didn't even use the balls in the video, so you're just going to be confused forever. But I was holding my balls, and Liz, like, you kind of looked at me. You're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm ready. When they call us, we have to go. And you're like, when they call us, and you were like trying to explain to me, you're like, look.
I'm like, Heidi,
Look.
hun.
She was like, this is... And then they call, like, the number before us, and then there's a pause. And I was like, oh, no, I'm holding my balls for nothing. And you kind of, like, had this moment of, like, defeat. And I was like, no. And then they're like, and number 30. And we both just, like, stared at each other, and everyone's like, stand up and go. We're like, we need help. We're also shocked.
Like,
but
I am
neither
one-
of us can stand up.
I am one with the floor right now. I'm going to need some helpers. No,
But it was just,
honestly, like I had kind of at that point almost like made my peace with it. What I was upset about was not even upset. That's the wrong word.
Disappointed?
Bummed.
Yeah.
I guess was because so this whole journey to San Diego, Bros and Cons, these two amazing videographers who go to all sorts of cons and film cosplayers and feature them. They've been working on a cosplay documentary, and they've been slowly filming me making these costumes as my like journey to San Diego for their next installment. And I remember, at that time I was like, okay, I'm so proud that we got here, and I had my freak out and got over it, and then we went out on that stage, and I finally got to do this thing that I've been wanting to do for forever. But I remember, kind of thinking like, oh shoot, like Bros and Cons, like they invested so much time in filming this whole journey and me making these costumes, and now I'm gonna have to go back to Arizona and be like, well, we went, we participated, it was fun, and just
and that would be the end of the documentary.
Yeah, that would be the end of that part of the documentary, and I was kind of like, oh, like I wish they had, like I just felt bad,
and they had some trouble, so they couldn't get all the filming in that they wanted,
right,
due to their room. So it was kind of like you were like, I don't want to double disappoint them.
Yeah, so I was kind of like bummed about that. That I was like, okay, like it'll be fine. Obviously, they didn't start filming the documentary.
They didn't give you like, here's your assignment.
Right, with that in mind, they weren't like, you better go win or this is gonna be terrible. Like, obviously not. That wasn't their attitude at all. But I was like, like that's
you just
kind
wanted
of a
to
shame.
give them something, yeah.
Yeah, that the documentary would be like, oh well, yeah, I went and it was fun and everything was great and didn't win. Oh well, we'll try again next time. So actually, they were pretty excited when they found out.
Yeah, it's a great end to a documentary.
Yeah. So what was going through your mind? Did you think, because I for a second was like, oh no, we're not getting called. Did you have that?
Oh yeah,
moment?
no, I definitely thought that like it was over. We tried our best, and oh well, like yeah, it's sad, but there were so many good people there, and a lot of people walk away with amazing costumes and they don't win.
Yes.
And it's like, okay,
there's only so many prizes.
Right, it's fine. Like, not everyone can get an award, and, if everyone did get an award, it wouldn't be as special.
It wouldn't be a competition.
Right,
yeah.
It wouldn't be much of a competition if everyone got a participation trophy
It'd be
either.
elementary school.
Yeah, that's true.
So when they called our number, what was going through your head?
I was like
numb or
Oh, yeah. No, honestly, like, it's been, like a month now, and I still can't believe it. To be perfectly honest,
you kind of had like a star struggling. You're just like, oh my god.
Like I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe we're gonna walk away with something. Like just it's such an honor just to be on that stage at all.
Well, and we had been called last. And so we were like, is it better to get called last? Is it worse? What does that mean? What did we get? Standing backstage, not knowing, and we're just like trying to go through our heads like, okay, well, they've already called this. There's this many people backstage with us. There's this many awards.
We're
What
trying
could we
to
have
do
gotten?
like quick math.
Yeah, we're
and
all trying to figure out
it
like, what do you think you got? I don't know. What did we get?
Right. Everyone who's in line to get their award is just so excited. And they're like, okay, well, like, I think they start with this. And then there's like this many unofficial awards. So
Yes.
it's kind of funny how like everyone's trying to figure it out.
Yes.
As soon as the unofficial awards were done and neither of our numbers had been, like, our names had been called up, we're like, okay, so unofficial's over. Okay, so official honorable mentions. And me and Vanellope's, we were like, okay, so we obviously got an honorable mention. I mean, they're not going to pick us for an original award. We still had complete doubt, even though we were backstage.
Yeah, you're like, why are we here? What's going on?
And then the honorable mentions got called, and they were done. And I'm like, we have to come back next year.
Like, what does this mean? So when you found out, what was your emotion when you got most humorous?
My first emotion, actually just the first things out of my mouth was, am I funny? I didn't know I was being funny. I was just being Ralph. And apparently Ralph is funny. I just had like an existential crisis of, am I a funny person? People keep telling me I'm funny and I didn't know that. So I definitely wasn't going for the most humorous, because there are definitely cosplays in the competition where you're like, that definitely you're going for the most humorous.
Yeah, you can tell that they have maybe a goal in mind of
Yes.
like what award they would like.
If anything, I was going for most beautiful with
the
Vanellope dress, but most humorous, I'm like, I didn't know we were funny. Okay. We went on stage and I tried to still be funny, and I lifted up because you get medals instead of trophies at San Diego, and I lifted up the medal.
You actually walk across and they hand it to you.
Mm-hmm. And in the movie of Wreck-It Ralph, his whole, like, quest is to find a medal.
Yes.
So when I went on stage and they handed me a medal, I'm like, well, here's my golden opportunity.
Right.
I held it up in the air, and to the audience, I shouted very loud, I got my medal, in a deep, like, Ralph voice. And they lost their minds. They, like, stood up and screamed, and I'm like, at least I know my background character. And I just bounded off stage, and I'm like, I didn't know I was funny, but I am, I guess.
So when they announced, Liz, that you got...
well, Sarah and Jareth won Best in Show, and like I said, I still...
Best in Show.
I still don't believe it. I don't know if I'll ever believe it. I think it's just one of those, like, peach fever dreams that I'll be like, that was really good, you know? Maybe one day it'll happen in real life. Who knows? I still don't believe it, even a month later. It's crazy to think about. So, I mean, I have the medal, but it's
right? And it's kind of funny because it's like, you're trying to figure out. You didn't think for a split second there was, time where you were like, I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting a medal. And then they announce it. Okay, I'm getting something. What am I getting? And then they finally come to us, Best in Show. What did that feel like as soon as they said that? What went through your head?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. There were no words, no thoughts to be had. I was just like, oh gosh, like, please don't. The whole worry the whole night, and you know this well,
yes,
was like to please not trip on any of the 8 layers that make up this dress. And so I was like, please do not trip on any of the 8 layers that make up this dress, like, please. So that was.
I was worried about dropping my balls and murdering an audience member.
You know, David Bowie would never drop his balls.
He would not.
He would never. So yeah, it's still hard to believe. And I don't know how many times tears were shed backstage, yes. But that last time, I seriously,
happy tears.
Oh yeah, I was shedding a few tears, and you were like, we are getting like our publicity pictures taken. You need to stop crying.
Yes, I was like, Liz, they're gonna take photos, and I was like,
Heidi, it is too late. I am already crying.
Because I was like, handkerchief, put it in your eyeballs. But it was so funny because I think both of us were kind of just like we just walked out on stage. Because it's so funny, you just kind of walk across and they hand it to you, tell you good job, and then you walk off the other side, but we were just like, yay! Like, we looked at the audience and we both kind of just bowed, we're like, what do we do? Like, what are you supposed to do? Because we were both just like, in shock. It's like,
yes.
Best in Show.
At San Diego Comic-Con, you guys.
Oh
this is one of the biggest in the country.
I'm still in shock.
It was our first time going. I don't know how we both won official awards. I'm still in shock.
Well, and I think one of the first things I did after texting my husband and saying that is I texted pros and cons.
Yes.
The girls, and I felt so bad because after the fact, Vic, one of the videographers, was like, yeah, I was about to fall asleep when I got your text, and
no.
It woke me up, and I freaked out and immediately texted Katie, and I guess Katie, the other girl, was like, yeah, I started shouting like, Liz won Best in Show, oh my god. And her boyfriend was like, who's Liz? And so, they're super excited because it's basically like a fairy tale ending
right?
to this documentary that I'm like, oh, well, happy I could be of assistance. I can't think of a more perfect ending, but honestly, I just, with those two costumes, it kind of felt like everything came together.
I mean, it was kind of a fairy tale.
It really was with this dream of mine. I can't think of, obviously, it could not have gone any better than that. That is like best case scenario for what happened. So it is thrilling. When it does kind of sink in a little bit, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
You have moments of like,
I do have
Best in
moments.
Show.
I do have moments, but they're fairly intermittent. It's still hard to say it out loud to people because I'm like, I don't think that really happened. All this time I've been claiming a win that someone else got.
And what's really cool is we have pictures, we have video that I'm gonna go ahead and post for us. And I want to say about a week later, a friend of mine was like, hey, don't you know this girl? And she sent me a picture of Liz dressed as Emperor Kuzco, because that was the costume you wore just beforehand, before the Masquerade.
Right.
We just kind of walked around and did a little bit. And you had a photograph. I don't remember. Was that? Do you remember what website that was?
It was the IMDb.
That's right. It was the IMDb. And so it was kind of a big deal. I'm like, that's so funny because I don't know, like, this friend isn't really big into cosplay or anything, and somehow she came across this photo of you, and I was like, look, you're here too!
You're so famous.
It's been pretty cool to see the pictures of the costumes on, like, the sci-fi website and, like, major websites.
Yes, and that was really cool. I had somebody like, did I see a picture of you on the sci-fi website? I'm like, maybe.
You were the perfect Jareth, like, of all time. I just must say,
I don't think
perfect.
So, but
perfect.
Thank you.
I hope you wear that coat all winter long.
Yeah. So the big question now is, are you going to do this again? Are you going to go back?
To San Diego?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we have to. They gave us 44 passes.
But are you going to compete?
Oh, of course. I have
Of course.
I have, like, Slytherin tendencies, so
if
I'm
someone
very
gives you that
ambitious.
opportunity, you have to take it.
Yeah.
What about you, Liz?
As far as the Masquerade next year, at this moment, so I just started a new job, like, immediately after we got home. Like, a couple days later, after San Diego, I started a new job. So, right now, I'm very tired. And at this moment, I'm kind of like, I might take a year off from the Masquerade. That might change. I might change my mind if a really killer idea presents itself. But they have other competitions at San Diego that, since we have the tickets, that I'm kind of interested in entering. So I might try my hand at something a little different next year. But as far as masquerades, I do have Masquerade plans. I just don't have San Diego Masquerade plans at this time.
And hey, she won Best in Show. You can't get better than that. I still haven't won Best in Show, so I'm going to compete until I get that, at least,
Well, there you go. And you mentioned Bros and Cons. Do you know when that documentary will be available? Is that going to be later this year?
Yeah, it'll be later this year, and actually, they are going to be doing a few more Sarah Jareth things with us to kind of wrap it up. Yes, they're not through. So in September, they're going to be filming those things. They've so far just released little tiny snippets, pictures of me working on the costumes, and then later this year, they should have that segment ready to be released. It's supposed to be, part of a bigger cosplay-based documentary called Cosplay versus the World, and they've already filmed one cosplayer, so I'm the second person that they've been filming, and they're hoping to kind of put all these cosplayers together into like a 45-minute long documentary.
Very cool. And we'll link to Bros and Cons so you can find them on social media and you can check out what's going on. I'm also going to link Prue and Liz so you can check out their other cosplays. And I'll show you some videos and awesome photos of all of us gorgeous people at Comic-Con. So the last thing I want to say, what do you have, what suggestions do you have for somebody that dreams of competing in a big convention like San Diego Comic-Con? What would you suggest to them?
Research.
Research?
Please do the research. Watch previous competitions. Get ideas. focus on if you are going to compete for fun, do what you want. If you're going to compete to win, there are definitely important steps to take. Pick a known character. Pick something that you can think of something entertaining to do on stage other than just walking out and posing. Make sure you make every piece like it's going to be taken off and looked at separately, because they look for craftsmanship at a big competition like this. And try to stay humble. Try to think like you are not going to win anything. And that way, if you follow these very simple steps and you do your research and you pick the good character and everything, that if you do win, it's so much better than if you thought you were not going to win beforehand.
Yeah.
I would say definitely do not start with San Diego. You certainly can. Obviously, you do you. But I have to tell you, if San Diego Masquerade had been my first masquerade ever, I probably would have had a nervous breakdown. Just from being in a room with all of these amazing people, and it's pretty high pressure. Even if you're just there for fun, it's still
even the under
high
16
pressure.
level was they brought it.
Oh
People
yeah, but
come
I mean
from all over the world.
Oh yeah, and I mean the audience for this thing is huge. They filled up the ballroom and then 2 separate overflow rooms that they
Projected.
Yeah, they projected the show into overflow rooms. That's how many people show up for this show. So it's a big deal. I would say
be comfortable being in front of a lot of people.
Oh yeah. Well, it helps that the stage lights are pretty blinding, and I always black out the moment I step on stage. So, but I would say do some smaller cons, work up to it. It was definitely something that Prue and I have competed at many masquerades at this point, and even after all of that, I guess you could consider it practice, we still were kind of overwhelmed.
Yes,
definitely.
By how big this masquerade just feels. So I would say definitely start small. That would be my advice, and then work your way up to it. But San Diego has been a dream of mine for many, many years, and I'm glad that we finally got to go do it. It was a wonderful experience, even with all of the challenges.
Absolutely. And I think as someone, because I didn't have to worry about as much cosplay, like bringing items, such like that. So what I would suggest from my perspective is bring snacks, bring water. It's probably going to be provided, but it's good to have your own water bottle to sip. Don't get dehydrated. Be realistic about how much stimulation you can handle, or how much standing around or kneeling around. Like if you need to bring yourself a small little chair to sit on, or a pad to kneel on or something, try to think of stuff like that, because you have to keep in mind you're not going to be getting ready in your home unless you live very close to the convention. If this is a costume that you need to get ready there, keep in mind that you want it to look its best, so you want to look your best too. So bring snacks and take it slow. Obviously, I think there was a few moments where we took it a little too slow. We're like, we got this, we got time, and then we rushed to the end. It's find a steady pace and don't freak out, but get yourself ready as early as possible. If there's anything that can wait to the last minute, make sure it's not something complicated.
Yes.
Don't try to I'll do all my makeup in the last 5 minutes or something. But I think overall it was a very well run, great convention for my first time competing, even though it was I'm just the model. It was really nice that it wasn't just a chaotic mess, because I think that would have made me be I don't want to do this again. But the way that San Diego was run, I was yeah, this is fun. I'll do this again.
Considering the beast that convention is, it was run so smoothly the entire show.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I would definitely agree with Prue though. Make sure you do your research, and I would say for something so big, especially if you're going for a win, pick something that you love.
Yeah.
And that you are passionate about and that you'll enjoy working on.
I watched Wreck-It Ralph maybe 10 times the week leading up to it. If I didn't like that movie, I wouldn't have been able to pull off the character.
Right.
I love that movie, so that's why I did the act.
Well, you do have to kind of consider the crowd. You can't do it entirely for the crowd. You do have to make a costume that's something that you enjoy and something that you love and will maybe wear afterwards as well.
Hopefully. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. Did you have anything that you wanted to say before we go?
Got any pizza?
This time we won't have to wait till 2 a.m. for it. What about you, Liz?
I think that's it.
Yep.
All right. Thanks so much for listening to A Shilling for Your Thoughts. You can find me on the Papago Podcast Network. That's papagopodcastnetwork.com. You can find that on Facebook, and you can also find A Shilling for Your Thoughts on Facebook or shillingforyourthoughts.com. Thank you so much for joining me.
Productions Cosplay. I'm found on Facebook as Productions, Instagram as Prue_Ductions, and I do have an Etsy store if you ever want to buy little things from an award winner.
What about you, Liz?
And I'm Liz from Ambrose Cosplay, and you can find me on Facebook under Ambrose Cosplay, Instagram under Ambrose_Cosplay, and I have an Etsy under the same name as well.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys.